obtuse, equilateral, and whatever the other angle is in triangles, parallel and perpendicular. We're talking about angles today. It's Jose, your owner operator of Big T's, and I'm here to talk about the importance of angles and perspective. Although I feel like they're the same thing, if depends on what angle you look at it. Now, perspective and angles is very important when you look at your business. The margins at our store, our flagship store, are very low. They're about 3 to 5%. And most places talk about how margins are really low in restaurants. They're not wrong. We have to worry about COGS, the price of the foods. We have to worry about payroll. We have to worry about utilities and all the other stuff. And then after that, then money's left over. Now, that's looking at one angle. But then I look at it the perspective that I get a salary, my dad gets a salary, my brother gets a salary. And albeit our salaries are that much more than a typical salary, I think that if you take that into perspective, then you're like, maybe 5% of profit isn't the same as I thought before. Now, I was talking to ChatGPT about this, and before I go on to my story, again, I'm a firm believer of you always got to look at a different angle, and you always got to look at the perspective, because it matters a lot. Back to my story. I was talking to ChatGPT about, I was blown away by the amount of sales that we make in our both locations. But at the same time, our margins are really low. We're talking about the Whittier store makes about 5% margin, and the only money I take from there is gas money. And that store needs a lot of maintenance and a lot of stuff that needs to be put in, and I've been putting money in slowly. So I'm not really seeing positive growth right there. But I was blown away by the amount of sales that we make. And it got me thinking of this angle. It is very lonely being an owner operator because not a lot of people will understand us. Not a lot of people are willing to put in the work to open their own business and work the crazy hours, to work on the weekends, to not be able to go on that vacation for a couple of years. Now, that being said, as an owner operator, I love what I do. Of course, owning a business is for the money, right? We got to make money. But it got me thinking about the angle of this, and it's like, wait a second. If I open another store and I run the same amount of sales as I do in our second store, and then I could do this again and do this again, that 5% of margin with, let's just say my gas money, spend about $300 of gas a week. Let's say those $300 gas a week. If I can do that times 4, times 5, let's do times 5 because it's easier numbers. Times 5, you're talking about $1,500 for 5 stores, making you a low amount of margins, right? Which is fine. And it's like, now the picture looks different because of the perspective and the angle you're looking at it. Not only that, I believe as an owner operator that we have to pay our employees a decent wage, not minimum wage, a little bit higher at least, you know? Obviously, as a small business, I can't pay everybody $40 an hour. I wish I could, and if I could, I would. But back to my angle, if I open more stores, then I could start taking less money of my salary and start paying myself from every other store, meaning that frees up some salary cap and I could pay my employees more. See my point? Now, you always got to look at a different angle because I didn't think like that at all. I just thought at first, dang, our margins are low. You know, like I see the point that everybody talks about how owning a restaurant is something they wouldn't do because of the low margins. Well, yeah, but you have to consider that if you're working in it, you have to take a salary because you're not going to do this for free, right? And it got me thinking, nobody talks about this. Everybody says what I said right now, that owning a restaurant is low margins and I wouldn't invest in it. All these investors, these famous people, these rich people, no disrespect to them. I'm a nobody, especially compared to these people. I'm a nobody. But it's like, yeah, they're right. But at their angle, they're right. Now looking at my angle, they're not right, you know? So again, if anybody is thinking about owning a restaurant, if anybody owns a restaurant, I'm here making content in hopes that it helps people out, to show you what I've learned and what I'm using and what actually works for me in this day of age in the state of California where everything is a little bit more expensive. And taxes are a little bit higher to be able to do it. Because if I'm able to do it, then I think everybody could be able to do it. But you gotta be able to put in the work. And you gotta look at the angle and the perspective, because the angle matters. Because if you only look at it in one way, then you won't see the full picture.